find templates to work with, right? So in CSS, how to handle various designs and templates we learned. Now, next important, what we need to understand and work with in CSS is about how to deal with CSS 2D transforms. So we have to work with CSS 2D transforms, right? Yeah. So CSS 2D transforms, 2D transforms. How we can deal with the 2D transforms. So in CSS, how do we handle various effects and deal with them? Technically, what is the main intention is CSS 2D transformer feature actually allows the element to be transformed in two-dimensional space, actually in two-dimensional space. So generally two-dimensional space. It allows the element to be transformed in two-dimensional space actually. That means along X and Y axis. That means 2D is along X and Y axis actually. Transform along X and Y axis. Transform property actually is transform property is used to define 2D transforms actually. So transforms is nothing but transformation. That means changing its appearance, its location. All this comes under transforms. And transform contains several important functions, or some important functions. But problem here is 2D transforms, the CSS transforms are not directly supported. So CSS transforms are not directly supported on various browsers. They are not directly supported on various browsers. So they are not supported on various browsers. Actually, we have to use special plugin for different browsers. So we have to use a special plugin. Actually, you have to use special plugin reference for different browsers. So different plugin reference for browsers. Actually, it depends on the plugins actually. For example, what are the various plugins we have and how we can actually deal with those plugins generally. So different plugins depending on actually browser. Depending on browser, the plugins are supported actually. For example, if we are using Chrome or Safari or Opera Opera. Then we have a plugin called WebKit. WebKit. We have to use this plugin called WebKit. If we are using Firefox like browser, we use Mozilla, M-O-Z, Mozilla. If we are using Internet Explorer, Internet Explorer, Internet Explorer 9 and like other versions, because older versions don't support them actually, we have to use MS for Internet Explorer. That's how actually we need to define the transform. Means actual syntax, technically, what is the basic syntax is to use those effects. Generally, syntax for different browsers, you have to write like this. Actual standard syntax is we have transform, and here we have to define. Transform uses some attribute, so some attribute, so some method attribute, something like this, some method. Actually this is standard syntax. Actually that is the standard syntax. So if you are writing for different browsers, then we have to write like WebKit. So WebKit transform, WebKit transform, and we need to configure some method like this. We have to write. Suppose we are writing for Mozilla, so we write MOZ and transform, and some method, some properties, some values. If it is for Internet Explorer, MS transform and translate. Other browsers are transform, translate, or some method, right? Other browsers can understand. Few browsers can understand, few browsers cannot understand. That is the reason one of the main problem is even one option is enough. As a developer, we have to write so many options because we are not sure which browser user can use. That's the reason we have to write for various browsers. So we have to write for various browsers. That is one important point. So technically, so you will see that when we are writing for production and it is ready to go live, then in development you will test on a specific browser, so no problem. Finally, when it goes out, then it should have all these plugins actually. That means every effect you need to write in all these options. Otherwise, it may not work in certain browsers, right? So how these are used and what are the various transform functions, right? Let's see. The various transform functions are the various transform functions provided by CSS transition or CSS transform by CSS. The various transform functions provided by CSS. We have so many transform functions. One we have, like first one we have the function. So translate is one function. Translate is a function. Actually, translate, it is used to move the object from its current position to a new position along x and y axis. So there are so many functions. What are those functions? We will see with examples. We will see. So translate is one function. The purpose of translate function is it is used to move the object from its current position to a new position, current position to a new position along x and y axis, along x and y axis. That is actually translate is used for. Syntactically, how this option is used. So syntax, how translate is used. So we have to write transform, and we need to use translate. Transform will use that translate. First it defines x pixels, and it defines y pixels. Along x and y pixels, how many pixels, x-axis, y-axis. Or you can write in this way also. We can write transform. So we can write translate x, and pixels. Directly you can define pixels. It will be only x-axis. So you can give transform, and you can define translate. This is actually translate x. Yeah. We can directly use translate y, and translate y, and we can define directly pixels. So simultaneously you can handle both of them, or we can define so one after another. That is what actually transform, right? Later I will tell you about time, transition, animation times also. We will see that initially. So that is transform option defined. How this actually works. So for example, let's see how we can define this. How we can use this, one simple example. Yeah, so let's take our project here. Fine. Yeah, so I'm adding one new folder here, CSS 2D. Okay, I'm adding a new file, some translate.html. Okay, let's see how we can configure the translates. So options, how we can define them. So basically we will just create a simple document structure, doc type HTML, and head. And here we are defining some style, which we will keep with some effects. In the body section, so we are just adding one image source, some images. So we have some speaker.jpg. So initially it will have some width and height. So 200 pixels. Okay, now that is actually the image. So let's see, in the output it displays its position here. Okay, now this is actually its position size. Originally it is this. Now what we are doing is, for image, actually we are defining margin left margin as some 10 pixels. Okay, from the left some 10 pixels it's adjusted. Okay, now for image we are writing hover. already we discussed about hover. So in the CSS selectors, we discussed about some options, how they are used. And hover is on mouse over, right? When mouse is over, then we will set transform as translate. So it has to move to x-axis some 400 pixels, y-axis also 400 pixels. So both directions it has to do. Now, if we are writing for different browsers, currently not required, but better we keep in one example so that you will know. WebKit plugin, we have to write transform, that is translate, and that is 400 pixel and 400 pixel. So we need to write similarly like Mozilla. So that is transform, and this is translate and 400 pixels. This is how we write actually. That means even one is enough, but we are not sure which browser he may use. In that case, we have to write for every browser. So that's the reason we have to define the options like this. So translate, okay, and 400 pixels. This is our first example, so I am writing. Otherwise, one is enough actually for us. Okay, now important is this transforms will immediately happen. That means it will transform. When mouse is over the image, it will transform to this position. It will change immediately. Within a second, it will be changed. So you can observe that. When I move the mouse pointer onto it, it will come to that position automatically. So I want to set some delay time. Then we can set the delay time by using transition. Transition defines the delay time, how much time it should delay. That means the transformation, how much time you want to keep. So 2 seconds I want to keep. Milliseconds, seconds, you can define 2 seconds. There are several options for transition. We will see that. Initially, on mouse over, to translate to this position, it should take 2 seconds. Okay, good. Again to come back to this, to this normal position, that also transition, it should take 2 seconds like this. So otherwise it will be immediate, right? Now see what happens is, when I move the mouse onto it, then it will move to that location slow, and remove the mouse from it, then it will come back to the normal position. That means we are changing the position of object. On mouse over, I am changing the position of object. So we are changing 2 directions. We can do in any one. Suppose I can give translate. I can give translate X. I can give translate Y. I can give any one direction. So this is generally the transform, translate, how you can translate. So this example is just to understand how actually translate works. Okay, let me change here. I don't need all these actually, until or unless we are defining for different here. Suppose this x-axis is 0 pixels and y-axis is 400 pixels, or x-axis 400 pixels, y-axis is 0 pixels. And when we move the mouse onto it, it will move horizontal, and it will move only horizontal. When mouse is over, it will move to that location. So that means you can define by using any of these, or you can just write translate X, so you don't need to define the Y position. It will be working only for translate X position. It will be working only for X position. It will not be working for Y. It's your wish how you want. You can configure in different ways. You can write so along X, Y, or any another specific direction you can define like this. So that is actually simple option, that is transform. That means how we can translate. So translate is translating, changing the position of an object from one location to another. That's a general example for how do we use the translate, right? Next, important, after understanding the translate, so we need to know about another important function, that is rotate. Yeah. So we have transform and we have rotate. Generally, so rotate is casually, it is nothing but it rotates on in specified degrees. So it is used to rotate. It is used to rotate any element, around its origin. So it actually uses the value defined in angle. It defines an angle with degree as a unit, degree units. So value defined in degree units, it will use the value defined in degree unit actually. That is rotate. So rotates an element along its origin. And this also have different values, like the default rotation is clockwise. So clockwise, right? So the default rotation is clockwise. So you can define define negative value to use counterclockwise. So you can define counterclockwise, that by using negative, you can define a negative value. So actually negative value means it is a negative angle to use counterclockwise actually. So that is rotation. That means how we can manage the rotation. Okay, so let's see the option how it actually works with that rotation. You can define negative value. How it actually works, how it is configured and how it works. Let's see. So same, I will add one more option here. So let's say rotate.html. Let's create a simple page to understand this rotate option. So here we are adding a simple div. Let's name this as class container. Okay. In that we have a div, name this as class sumbox. Fine. In this we will have some image. It is from images speaker.jpg. and width and height some 200. Okay, width 200 and height 200. Okay, now this is the image we have displayed there, same, right? So I will keep this container in a style. Let's add the container, and let's keep this container with some flex type. So width I will give 100%. Okay, and height also 100%. Okay, and border as 2 pixels, solid and dark cyan. Okay, and just display as flex, display flex. Okay, and we will use align items to center and justify content to center. Okay, and here the default box in which we kept the image, box width is 200 pixels and box height is also 200 pixels, and box some background color, some say yellow, something like this. You can keep a box, you can directly keep an image. I'm just giving for box because it is having an image, no need of any background color, right? And we are just defining some transition here. So this box should change. This will keep everything in this way. It will keep the content in this way, center. So that generally we know that, right? And here the box, when it is hover, then transform. So rotate. It should rotate among specified degrees. That means I said as 180 degree. So, and the transition, so we said transition as 2 seconds, 2 seconds transition. And to return back into that transition also 2 seconds. Okay. Now usually here when we give the effects, generally syntactically how we write is to write the syntax same. We have transform, and transform can use rotate, and actually it requires an angle. And you can use transform along rotate x. You can rotate along x. You can rotate along x with a defined angle. You can use transform, and we can rotate y along a specific angle. So that is, you can define. You can even define a negative value like transform, and you say rotate, and you can define a negative value, so negative angle. Just the syntax I given. So once you do this, that means currently we are rotating at 180 degrees, right? And here in this example, I am rotating at 180 degrees. And you can see that when I move the mouse, it will rotate into that direction, 180 degrees of that particular image. And again, move back and it will be again normal to that, right? We are transforming to that 180 degrees. So we can directly put for the image for the box. So suppose I defined as some 360 degree. So defined with that, and it will be rotating in this way. And it is rotating in this way. Any specific direction, you can make it rotate the angle you want. So this, if I define in a negative value, minus 360 degree, then it will be counterclockwise. It will be rotating counterclockwise. So counterclockwise, it will be rotating that. In an opposite direction, it will be rotating. That usually you can manage with a negative value by configuring it, you can define, right? That is the basic how we can manage. So that is how we use the rotate option for transform. Here we have the other options. First, let's copy that here. You can directly put for image or anything. Just for center, I given a box actually, right? So this is an example. So for using the rotate option, how actually rotate works. The rotate works. So basically how the rotate is going to use. So we are taking that. This is actually how the rotate works. So this is how generally the rotate option works. So we are using along XY axis also important here to understand. Along XY axis is also important to understand. Actually, if I change this image, so yeah, let's keep that image. And in the box, actually, suppose if I said, suppose 40 degrees, and it is rotating 40 degrees like this, 40 degrees like this. So now if I defined, so rotate X 40 degrees, rotate X 40 degrees, then it will be rotating in this way. Actually, it is X axis. Generally, you may see that it is rotating at X axis actually. So that is, it is not shrinking the width actually, it is rotating on X axis. For example, I will remove this image for you. And I will give some text here, And let's put this box with a background color. So background color as some yellow. Okay, that is the background color it is having. And you can see that is the x-axis rotation actually. That is the x-axis rotation. X-axis rotation. In 3D effect, we will see more. Suppose here I say rotate to y 40 degrees. Y 40 degrees. Then usually it will be like this. It will be like this. Actually, it is not shrinking the width and height. It is not shrinking the width and height. It is rotating on X and rotating on Y axis. Actually, it is little bit tilting actually. So I will show you in 3D. We will learn 3D, then third dimension, if you can keep on an image, then you can see them so more clearly. If you can put in a 3D, you can see it more clearly actually. So that means, so suppose width and height for this is okay, width and height, width height is 100, box is 100 pixels. Width and height for the box is 100 to 100 pixels. Okay. So you cannot see that alignment correctly here. You cannot see. You see it looks like you are adjusting the width. Even I keep some proper image into that. Image source is equal to images, some shoe.jpg. And yeah. So, and so width is 100 and height also 100. Height also 100. Usually you can see that when I move the mouse onto that it looks like this. It looks like this. So that is y-axis. Suppose I said 60 degree of rotation, then it will be like this. You may feel like it is actually shrinking. So x-axis also, you will feel like it is shrinking. It is shrinking. Actually, it is not shrinking. It is actually rotating. Rotating means in the diagram, what it is happening is, so if it is the object in this way, if it is the object in this way, that means 60° it is tilting like this, 45° it is rotating like this, it is rotating like this. We can't see the 3D angle until or unless we keep some 3D image. 3D image. That's the reason. The 3D image means we will arrange some 3D box. Then you can see that XY axis rotating correctly. Right? Initially, it looks like changing the width and changing the height. No, it's not actually changing the width and height. It is X axis and Y axis. It is little tilting there. Right? That is what actually rotation happens. Rotation is happening. Right? You can define any specific angle. You can define counterclockwise if you want to do, then you have to define a negative value. Negative value. So that is actual the transformation, how it works. Another important. So we have scale. Another option we have scale. Scale. Scale is another option which is used for actually adjusting the height and width. That means you can transform the width and height. So increase or decrease the size. So it is used to increase or decrease the size, decrease the size of element along X and Y axis, along X and Y axis. This is also defined along X and Y axis. So usually, so we have to define the syntax in this way. So that is transform, and transform will use a scale, and here scale X and we have scale Y. We have to define the X and Y axis positions in this way. Or we can also use, so transform, we can directly use scale X and some units. So we can also define transform, and we can define scale Y some units. Actually, one more important thing we should know is the scale units. The scale units are not actually defined in pixel. The scale units are defined in fractions. And actually, in the fractions, in the scale unit fractions, so 1 is equal to 100. So 1.5 is equal to 150. So that means 150 of its original actually. So 2 is equal to 200. That means 2 times than the original. So that is what actually the scale units are defined. We define the scale units in this way, technically how you configure. So the scale, we can adjust that and we can configure it. So it depends on our requirement, how you are configuring and specifying. This is also same. It is used for changing the width and height, Usually scale can adjust the width and height dynamically. So for example, suppose how it works, scale.html. Later, once you learn 3D, you can do little more better in appearance. Z-axis also will come, you can do better. Here, suppose in the head, we have that in the body. So I kept some div class as container, and in that we kept a marquee. We learned about a marquee. I defined a marquee, and some images we are using img src. It is some images, some speaker.jpg. Okay, that is the basic here we have. And similarly, some other images we will keep in a sequence. img src is equal to images some shirt.jpg, shoe.jpg. like source is equal to images like shirt.jpg. Okay, these are some options we have. src is equal to some images, some jeans.jpg. Okay. Now, usually we know that MarkU will start scrolling the content and display the content here. So MarkU will scroll the content and display the content here. That's actually scrolling and content. So it's not the original size for that. So it is scrolling. Now I just define the container here as with a style. So we have container defined with width is 100% and height also 100%, and justify content. So display as flex, just to keep the content, align items to center and justify content to center. And here initially image, whatever the image is there, image width is 100 pixels and image height, together all images we are configuring 100 pixels. And transition, I will set it to 2 seconds for image. And when image is hover, I'm changing the transform to scale 2. We can use scale 2, scale 3, how much percent it has to scale, right? And the transition is 2 seconds. That is the transition type we define. Now here another option is for the MarkU. I will give some basic options which already we learned. So on mouse over. So later we will see in JavaScript on mouse over this dot stop. We are stopping the MarkU. And on mouse out, this dot start. So that is start. And here we kept some scroll amount for the MarkU as some 10. And this is how actually it scrolls. This is the original size, actually 100%. Right. This is how it is scrolling the content here. So it scrolls the content here. And when I move the mouse onto it, so you can see it will pause. So it has to pause that and it should display that. So that means we have the options to write here. So on mouse over, it should pause, and on mouse out, it should resume. These options we are giving. Actually, we are already giving image hover effects. So technically, when you are giving the image hover effects, and MarkU also having an hover. For example, that means these animations, we are not stopping that. We are just using. That means on mouse over, mouse out, I am not giving that. Later, I will show you the pause options, how it will work. That means you can see the zoom happens for those images. But important is that image zoom, you can see the zoom happens for that and it will display, right? On mouse over, so generally we will later learn in JavaScript on mouse over, this dot stop, it will stop. Already one overview I have given to you that on mouse over, it will stop. And on mouse out, so this dot start, it will start. On mouse over and on mouse out, some effects are defined. The intention is nothing but you may move there, it will pause and it will zoom and it will again resume. So you are changing the size. But important, the height and width for the div, depending on, because the container, the height and width for the container and the height and width for the image, how you configure that to fit into it. Suppose height is defined to some 300 pixels. Height is defined to 300 pixels. So you move here, it will display. And now by using our 3D effects, what we can do is we can make this come out of that origin. We can make it come out of that origin. This is overflow. This is overflow is happening actually, because that is the basic height of that particular area, the height of that area. So we can make this come out of that area and we can display with 3D. That is what we will learn. How do we define Z axis also, Z position also, how to define. That you are going to see in 3 dimensions, how you can use. Currently only 2 dimensions, X and Y dimension we have to define. So actually, so transforms. So we can actually use Z index actually. We can use Z index. This Z index will get from the particular position. Suppose Z index 100 pixels like this on hover I define. So usually when I move this, it will come out of that here, right? Z index I can make. That means it comes like a 3D option on that. But I can change the overflow of that to come outside that area also. For that we need to transform scale and size with Z axis also, that you will see. So as of now, we are just learning about 2D effects, how we can use 2-dimensional. So we can keep in only X and Y. For Z, you have to define 3D scale, 3D transforms. You can keep along the Z axis also, which you will see later how to handle that. So technically, this is just to understand how we can change the size of image, how you can change the size of image, the scale percentage here. Suppose I'm changing scale as 2 or scale as 1.5. So because height of image also important to adjust how the basic height of image and the container height, how much. So you are keeping all this should actually correctly fit into that generally. So you can see now, you can see just only few percent it will increase and it will display. So the zoom levels, that means 1.5 means a 5% more than, that is 150 pixels. That means more than 5% more than the existing, it will display that. That's what actually it can handle. So that is the basic how we can manage, Actually, overflowing contents can be controlled with hidden and other options, and Z axis can be elevated so that it can come out of that scope and display the image correctly. That's good. That regularly you will see in websites that we can define in a 3-dimensional way. So this is an example how you configure the 3D, how you can define and configure the 3D, configuring and defining the general X and Y axis and scale, how you can manage. Next important here, another function is skew. Actually, skew is used for tilting the image. That means you can tilt by specified angle. Skew is tilt the image. That means it is used to tilt the image by specified angle. So it syntactically also same. So that means you can define transform. We can use transform. We can use skew x, and skew y. We can use skew x and skew y, or we can directly define transform. So here we can add skew x along x-axis the units, and skew y along the y-axis. It is for tilting the image. Transform, so skew, so that is y. That is tilting the image, that you can just tilt the image by specified angle by using this. along X and Y axis, it can tilt the image. So usually, suppose I defined some another option like, yeah, let's keep another like skew.html. So how we can tilt that image by specified angle, HTML and head. Okay, so here I just given a body, and in that I keep the div. So class as container, okay, and just I will give another div inside this, keep this as box, class as box, okay. And this is having so style, and we have that box, so with the width is equal to some 50 pixel, and height is equal to some 400 pixel, and border is equal to 2 pixel solid, okay. Background color is equal to some yellow, something like this. So, and the container keeps this, yeah. So that is the basic, the div height and width here. That is the basic div here. So we have that container say margin as auto, we configured that here. And we just keep justify content to center, align items to center. So the container will keep that. And we will keep display as flex and display as height, width. All these are required. Display as flex. We are keeping all this. Yeah. Now important is we can tilt this by specified degrees. That means by specified angle. That means just what we have to do is, so we have to go into the box. So box hover. When box is hover, here we say transform. So transform. So transform, it will use skew. Skew along the x-axis, it has to skew. Along the x-axis, it has to skew some 60 degree. You have to mention by which angle it has to skew. And the transition, I will give 2 seconds for that. Transition 2 seconds. So that is a skew. That means this is actually tilting that image on mouse over. So 60 degrees, it is tilting on 60 degree, it is displaying. Tilting the image. And again, normal, again, we need to keep that box. So to set transition to 2 seconds, transition. And that is how it actually happens. And again, I remove back, then it will be to the normal position. And that is what actually tilt along that X position. Suppose I'm defining as a skew along the y-axis, then skew along y-axis, it will be like this. It is skewing along the y-axis. So that is the skew of the image, tilt along the y-axis or along the x-axis. You can use both combinations. So we will put in some examples also, how we can add this reasonably. That means creating some ads, some banners which will respond for various options. We can do that. We can manage those effects and we can see how they are handled. Right? This is just another example of how you can keep the image tilt. And here we have to define the angle. And you know that this counterclockwise, that means you have to define a negative value into it, This is an example for skew, how we can manage the skew. So we have skew and we have scale, we have rotate. So these are the options we are configuring here. Now in the transitions and the transitions and transformations. So generally we given as transform. in the transform effects, the most options used here. So when you write a transform, so these are the options regularly used. So the scale, the skew, and the translate, and the transform, rotate are these options. Now in 3D, you can see rotate, 3D, rotate options, matrix, all these options you can see in 3 dimensions, how we can manage in the 3 dimensions. 3 dimensions. So generally transform contains, basically transform contains these options. Transform comprises of these options, right? So what are the 2D transform methods have? We can give a matrix also. Actually, transform methods, what we are having, generally all the transform methods we have. So CSS 2D transform methods. So what are the CSS 2D transform methods you have used here? Is actually we have translate. We have translate, and translate is along x and y. Translate is along x and y. So along x-axis and y-axis. And we have used translate x. So translate x, okay. And we have used translate y. So that is translate y. And we have used a scale. You can define x and y. You have defined scale as x. So we defined scale as y. We defined scale x, y. So we have an option rotate, and we can define rotate. So we can use skew. Rotate also is having rotate x, and we have rotate y, and we have skew, and we can define skew x, and we can define skew y. These are all the transform methods generally available. And we have actually a matrix method. This matrix is used to define a combination of effects. That means actually the matrix purpose is actually, so matrix, so the main purpose of the matrix is, so matrix method is used to define all 2D transforms to single element. It is like a shorthand way. Generally, we have a certain syntax for this. So what is the basic syntax for defining matrix? Actually, we have to write matrix. In the matrix, you have to first write scale x position. After that, after scale, order is also important. After scale, then skew x will come. Skew x position will come. Skew y position will come. After skew y, skew x position will come. After that, scale y position will come. Then we have to define translate x position, and we have to define translate y position. That's how we define the matrix. So matrix is used to define the transforms in this order. Actually, it is used for defining the transform in this order. Usually we need to configure in this order. So that is how we generally write the transforms. So for example, here, when you write the transform for this object, I am writing skew. So I will use here a matrix. That means we are configuring for a matrix. So that means we are defining for the matrix. On hover or anything, you can just define the effects and use the effects. Usually, when you add matrix, that means a transform as matrix. Here I am defining, so 0.5, I'm defining 0.5. So that is 0.5, just keep here in the box. I will remove the box related effects and all. I will remove all these effects. I will keep in a normal way to show the options here. So better I will keep it to a div so that it will be clear more for you to understand. Just because all the effects need to be defined there. So I will give an ID as div1. Okay, that is so matrix demo, something like this. That's a general text is there here, matrix demo. Now see what we are defining here. So for this div, I'm configuring like, so we have a div. And in this div, so we are adding, so in the div, we are adding width. So as 300 pixels, okay, height as 100 pixels, and background color as yellow something, and border as 2 pixel, and solid and red. Some options are configured here. Now what we will do is, so this div is configured in this way. That is the original one. So that means the div contains like this, the div contains like this. Now here I am defining a div, and that is for all the divs actually. And here I will give hash div1. That means I am defining specially for the div. That is the second one I am configuring that. That it is an ID selector. This is the div ID selector. And I'm using transform. So I'm using transform matrix. In the matrix, I am giving the option in this way, 0.5. That means this is actually the position, scale x position 0.5. Okay. And skew how much? Skew is nothing, 0. Skew y, skew x 0, 0. No tilting here. And how much effect you want to give. So, or you want to tilt, then you can give some effects. Actually, the effects are configured. So with all these options, that means I'm defining, so 0 and 0.5 and 0. If you want to make a little tilt, then we can give some tilting orientation, some 3. And how much you want, 0.5. So what is the first value, second value, third value, and fourth value? The first value is scale x, and all other values we can set. Let me keep one by one for your understanding. Suppose I will keep as 2. Okay, all I am giving 0, 0, 0, 0 options I am defining. The first one, skew 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That means all these values as defined. So that means scale is first value, and other values. So this is the first value, and these are the 5, 3, 4, 5. So in the 6 values, I defined only the first one in the matrix. Now the intention of this is when we move the mouse onto it, so it has to display that effect and show the effect. It should display and show the effect. So let's see how we can manage that. That means on mouse over or any particular, we have to configure the transition. So generally what happens now is, remember, all the combinations also should correctly fit into it. The combination also should correctly fit into it. If combinations are mismatching, then you will have a problem in presentation, right? Actually, usually here, suppose I defined on the div as hover, just basically hover. The IDs we have configured here. So you can see it is not displayed there. On mouse over, it is not displayed. So transform, I'm defining the transform here. Transition also, I'm configuring some transition effect. So transition, like I said, suppose time, that is transition is 2 seconds. 2 seconds transition I define. So when I mouse over, that is not showing any effect on that. It is not showing any effect on that. But actually, some effect is being performed on that. Some effect is performed on that. You can see only some size improved, size is changing actually. Very small, minute options, you can see that. You can see that. So the object size will change by specific percent. But this is not enough to understand. Why? Because we have to know all the combination, how they are defined, the combinations, how they are configured. Technically, what happens is, so on mouse hover and generally also we have transition as 2 seconds, 2 seconds. Then it is not going to display that on mouse over. So why? Because you need combination of other options also to define. Suppose how we are configuring this is, we are not depending on mouse over options and effects here. The original position is this, and in that original position, what we are doing is, for this div, we will change the matrix position like this. That means we will keep here an hash div. So that is the ID that we are defining. I will remove the transitions. We are not using any mouse over. And in the matrix position, so the initial position, this I set as a size 0.5, okay. And this is a skew I defined as 0.3, and some scale X also 0.5. Remember, the first value is scale X, that is scale X, and this value 0.5 is scale Y. These are scale X and Y values actually, X and Y values. These are skew values, how much you are skewing, how much you are scaling. The first value and the fourth value, they belongs to stretch. That means how much you want to define, because the first value is scale X and the second value is scale Y. Skew is 0, x-axis a little bit tilted. Translate position, that means we have to change the position. Suppose I defined some 200 pixels and we defined some 100 pixels. That's how we are changing the transform. And the matrix position we defined for that. Usually it will come into this location. You can see the tilting and the effects defined for that. The original position, that is actually the div positions. So that means it is having all the effects simultaneously defined at one place. You need to use correct combination. Suppose what I am doing is, suppose here the skew is also 0. Then you can see it will be normal. I need to adjust the width and height. That means x-axis and y-axis. Then I need to change these values. This is 1.5. So I defined 1.5. That means that will increase the height, because that is actually scale Y value. Scale Y value means you are increasing the height. So this is increasing the width. So width and height, this is the positions. So along x-axis, y-axis, where you want to keep, I say 200 pixels, it will keep the x and y-axis at the position. So that means all those transform effects can be defined through a matrix value. And for that, we need to follow this order. This is very important. You miss the order, you cannot display that effect. Now here also we can add some basic effects, means the basic transitions with animation with matrix. So that you will see how we can add some animations. This is generally for matrix, how you configure the object with the matrix. So that is the example for matrix. Now, if you want more animation to configure along different axes, then we have to go with the CSS 3 dimensions, 3D effects. How you can use CSS 3D effects, 3-dimension effects. We need to use a combination that we will see in the next session, right? Monday, we will discuss about that. And Monday, we will see some more options there where you will learn about animations, how they are handled with the CSS, right? That we can continue on the Monday session, okay? Right. These are all the CSS 2D effect. 3D we will see.